So I'm going to go over the last section of the prologue. I didn't assign it to anybody. It's actually on the slideshow. I filled it in already, the stuff about the host. But I just want to go back over the text really quick and make sure everybody's comfortable with how to read it and what you should really be getting out of it too. It's not just, hey, let's tell a story. It's being comfortable pulling out information about the story. So the first note that you see up here is that I want you to be able to acknowledge that you have access to tons and tons of information. So if there is a word you don't understand, or if there's a concept you don't understand, just because I haven't given you a resource doesn't mean you're stuck. Look things up, look at these words and Google things and look at stuff. So that's just a little side note there. So the host is kind of a secondary character. He is not one of the people who was originally supposed to go on the pilgrimage, and he decides to go on the pilgrimage later, but not for religious reasons, not as a pilgrim. So I'm just going to go through this. I'm going to try and do it kind of quickly, and you can spend time with the notes themselves later. It says, our host gave us great welcome. Everyone was given a place, and supper was begun. He served the finest victuals you could think. The wine was strong, and we were glad to drink. A very striking man our host withal, and fit to be a marshal in a hall. His eyes were bright, his girth a little wide. There is no finer Burgess in Cheapside. Bold in his speech, yet wise and full of tact. There was no manly attribute he lacked. What's more, he was a merry-hearted man. After our meal, he jokingly began to talk of sport. And among other things, after we'd settled up our reckonings, he said as follows, Truly, gentlemen, you're very welcome, and I can't think when, upon my word, I'm telling you no lie, I've seen a gathering here that looked so spry. No, not in this year, as in this tavern now. I'd think you up some fun if I knew how, and as it happens, a thought has just occurred. So we have a shift here. Remember that spaces indicate shift. They indicate a pause. They indicate like, oh, something's changing. You can see I have highlighted all of this stuff in purple because these are direct statements, direct characterization about the host. Things that we are coming right out and saying. He is a fit guy. He is a little wide in his girth. He's striking. He's friendly. He's merry-hearted. He's a joker. So these are all examples of direct characterization. We're coming right out and we're saying something about a character. You can still continue to infer things based on that, but direct characterization is when it's handed to you directly. We also have a lot of indirect characterization. So showing a character's actions, showing the things that they do, the way that they respond to certain situations, those are all examples of indirect characterization. Things where we see it and then we say, okay, that must mean he's a such and such person. Or, oh, they did this. That shows us how blank they are. So we have a lot more indirect characterization about to go on. To please you, costing nothing on my word, you're off to Canterbury, well, Godspeed. Blessed St. Thomas answer to your need. And I don't doubt before the journey's done, you mean to while the time in tales and fun. Indeed, there's little pleasure for your bones, riding along and all as dumb as stones. So let me then propose for your enjoyment, just as I said, a suitable employment. And if my notion suits and you agree and promise to submit yourselves to me, playing your parts exactly as I say, tomorrow, as you ride along the way, then by my father's soul, and he is dead, if you don't like it, you can have my head, hold up your hands and not another word. So he says, I've got this great idea. Let's play this game. You're all about to leave on this pilgrimage together. I have something that will take up the time and make the trip fun and enjoyable. And everybody agree that, hey, yeah, cool, we'll do this. Well, our opinion was not long deferred. It seemed not worth a serious debate. We all agreed to it at any rate, and bade him issue what commands he would. My lords, he said, now listen for your good, and please don't treat my notion with disdain. This is the point. I'll make it short and plain. Each one of you shall help to make things slip by telling 2 stories on the outward trip to Canterbury. That's what I intend. And on the homeward way to Journey's End, another 2, tales from the days of old. And then the man whose story is best told, that is to say, who gives the fullest measure of good morality and general pleasure, he shall be given a supper paid by all, here in this tavern, in this very hall, when we come back again from Canterbury. So this is his suggestion. This is what he says. He says, let's have a storytelling contest. We're all heading off to Canterbury. Let's tell 2 stories on the way out, and then everybody will tell 2 stories on the way back. And the person who tells the best story, fullest measure, good morality, general pleasure, the one that pleases the most people, what they are going to win is this big feast, this big supper, paid by all, here in this tavern, in this very hall. So this is very clever. This is a very kind of sly way of making sure that he has repeat business, so that when they're done with their trip to Canterbury, they don't all just scatter. They all travel back to his tavern. They stay in his tavern for several more nights. They agree to have a big feast that they're going to pay for, all for this contest that he has very cleverly come up with. He says, and in the hope to keep you bright and merry, I'll go along with you myself and ride all at my own expense and serve as guide. I'll be the judge, and those who won't obey shall pay for what we spend upon the way. Now, if you all agree to what you've heard, tell me at once, without another word, and I will make arrangements early for it. Of course we all agreed. In fact, we swore it delightedly, and made entreaty, too, that he should act as he proposed to do. Become our governor, in short, and be judge of our tales and referee, and set the supper at a certain price. We promised to be ruled by his advice, come high, come low. Unanimously thus, we set him up in judgment over us. More wine was fetched, the business being done. We drank it off, and up went everyone to bed without a moment of delay. So everybody agrees. They're like, yeah, cool, let's go on this trip, let's tell these stories. The host, the guy who owns the inn, the innkeeper, is going to come along at his own expense, but then he's going to get everybody to come back to his inn and stay at his inn again, and they're going to have this big feast and supper. So again, this is part of this, it's just part of the plot, but it's showing you some indirect characterization. It's showing you that he's such a jolly guy. He's such a friendly guy. He's able to convince the party to do this, but even almost to like beg him to come. They were like, yes, please come along. In fact, we swore it delightedly and made entreaty. They beg him. They're like, yeah, let's do it. Early next morning, at the spring of day, up rose our host and roused us like a cock, gathering us together in a flock. And off we rode at slightly faster pace than walking to St. Thomas's watering place. And there our host drew up, began to ease his horse, and said, now listen, if you please, my lords. Remember what you promised me. If evensong and matins will agree, let's see who shall be first to tell a tale. And as I hope to drink good wine and ale, I'll be your judge. The rebel who disobeys, however much the journey costs, he pays. Now draw for cut, and then we can depart. The man who draws the shortest cut shall start. So he's like, let's go. They start off on their journey. They go for a couple miles. They take a break, and he says, let's go. Let's start sharing stories. Tell these stories, and if anybody's not going to tell the stories, then they get to pay whatever is being needed along the way. So just some tips again when you're going through and you're reading something like this. If you need to go bit by bit, look at couplets. He rhymed those couplets so that we knew like they would stand out. But you can also do the same thing we did with Beowulf, where you're going by full sentences. Keep in mind that you're looking for things that are going to directly and indirectly characterize the people in the tale. Chaucer was writing this as an estate's satire, and the point of that was to make general statements about groups of people during his time period. So when he talks about a particular character, he's really kind of making a broader statement about people like that character. And then they head off on their journey and we start getting tales. So the next thing you guys will have a look at is the partner's tale.